everyone. My name's Lisa, and I am going to take you through the circulatory system. We're going to look at blood. So we're going to start with an introduction to the blood and its general components. And so this is going to be part one. Um, all right. Okay, so the introduction. So the blood has been considered to be like this mystery throughout time. It's always been, known that it was one of the vital forces. For a long time, there was bloodletting, right? That was actually a treatment for medical reasons, and there were many ways to do it with leeches, with the actual razors, and throughout many, many different cultures. Um, we also used to believe that things were in your blood, like, oh, it's in your blood to, I've inherited the ability to, I don't know, be a really good mathematician, or it's in your blood to be a really good pastry chef, right? But now, we know a little bit better. So blood cells were first seen with some of the very first microscopes. Obviously, people are really interested in that. And oftentimes in my labs, that's one of the first things my students want to look at as well. So when you do any kind of study about the blood, it's referred to as hematology. Like hema, well, let's see if I can get that a little bit better, like is referring to this iron-carrying protein group that's within the blood. And then the ology is the study of, right? So that's the etymology of it. And so it's for a long time it's just really hard to explain that blood has been hard to replace. Like that's kind of really the nuts and bolts of a lot of the research revolving around blood. So transfusions were a major breakthrough, understanding things like the blood groups, all this good stuff. And even now, recent developments in artificial blood or components of artificial, creating artificial blood are just kind of mind blowing and stunning, and hopefully something that will continue in the future. Okay, so anyway, blood stuff. Let's get going. So the things we really want you to get out of this part of your A&P2 class are we need you to describe the functions and the major components, like the bits and pieces of the circulatory system altogether. We're going to describe here the components and the physical properties of specifically blood, which is a very important and very interesting connective tissue. We're going to look at blood plasma itself, which is kind of like the watery part of blood, and it has a few dissolved elements into it that are really important to understand. And we're going to talk a little bit about things like the viscosity, which means the thickness of blood, or how many red blood cells are in it, or other things connected like white blood cells, or lack of water and all that good stuff, and also osmolarity. So this is going to be things like the ionic dissolved elements in blood, and we'll look at that a little bit as well. And then we'll look just at basically how you make it within the body. Okay, the functions of the circulatory system. The circulatory system has some main components. So there was a time when the circulatory system was like it is in insects, which is open, meaning there's a heart-like tube, which is still something that we do develop when we're in utero fetal. And the tube itself will like basically suck in blood on one area, and then push it out at a higher velocity over usually parts like like the brain and whatnot, right? And so, and then it percolates back throughout the body, and then it gets sucked back up into the tube. And so, what happened is we got big, especially also we got complex. And so, when that happens, we need to really concentrate the pressure of the blood and the direction of the blood. And so, in come the blood vessels, right? And so, that helps us use these new superhighways to direct blood. So it's not just diffuse within the body, right? Because we need to keep that pressure up. Also, the heart we're going to look at has gone through some pretty awesome, cool changes and folds. Also, the blood is now divided from things like the lymph, and which we'll get into a little bit later. So when we talk about the cardiovascular system, it really is only talking about the heart and the blood vessels, and the lymphatic system is kind of a mirror system to it. It's some people's opinions it's not actually shouldn't entirely be separate, but it does play some very important and distinct roles in immune function, which we'll get to later on, and we'll get to later on in the class. So the functions of the circulatory system, we're going to transport some pretty important things like some reactive compounds. And so some of those are, well, elemental oxygen, so O2, and then carbon dioxide, which is what we produce after we break down a bunch of carbon-containing sugar. And then oxygen, right, is very is highly reactive and is corrosive. So it's very useful in tearing apart and moving around electrons. We can harness their energy. It's also going to transport nutrients, waste, different types of hormones, or even cytokines. Also, in some cases, some stem cells, and also, unfortunately, some cancer cells, right? It's a key component when cancer becomes blood-borne, right? And cancer cells and stem cells have a lot in common. Um, so in terms of protection, it helps with the inflammatory response. It can limit or unfortunately speed up the spread of an infection. Many components of it are specially designed to isolate and destroy microorganisms. Really cool advances, speaking of blood, in terms of cancer cells and the immune system as well. We also can neutralize toxins and quite a few other things, pH it down. And one of the most important elements is we are going to talk about the ability to clot, right? How that is, how those scabs form. Super important. You may not realize it, but you are constantly tearing your blood vessels all the time. And so this is an incredibly important process. Also, we'll talk about the regulation thereof. So fluid balance, water, stabilizing pH, and temperature control. So an adult, and we're talking about an adult, we're talking about like 160-ish, like pounds, right? We're in the US, so we're using pounds here. Um, Pounds, which is funny because we're also going to do liters of blood. So with for those of us that are in the US, what that means is it's like 2 liters of Cokes or 3 2 liters of Coke, right? So like that's one way to think about it. So just think about Super Bowl Sunday, you got 2 liters of whatever your sister told you to pick up. So maybe it's Mountain Dew. That's supposed to be, somehow they ended up not, those are supposed to be 2 liter bottles. I don't have a lot of control over my writing utensils on an iPad yet. Um, It'd be that much, which is, it's like a lot, and we lose a lot of that in water every day. Adults, especially humans, we need to be drinking tons and tons of water, which we'll get to later on. So blood is a connective tissue. What did you just tell me? And so connective tissues, we think of having this one quality. It means it connects other tissues, right? And for a lot of us, we think of things like, ligaments that are connecting bones to bones, right? Or tendons that are connecting like muscle to bones, right? And stuff like that, like connected, but it connects in the way that it's like nourishing, and it helps bring like hormones and all kinds of signaling chemicals, and takes away waste. So it connects the body in a very different way, a very less, more chemical way, more maintenance level. Okay. So it has cells, which are going to be like the blood cells, right? Little blood cells. And then when we talk about the extracellular matrix, that's like pretty much like plasma. It can be some other stuff too, but generally, like, is the plasma. So plasma on a good day is like clearish to light yellow. And so when you think of plasma, I want you to think of urine, right? It's about urine. So when you have really dark yellow plasma, this is a sign of dehydration, of too many dissolved elements in. You'll oftentimes, we'll find, well, we'll talk about uh, hematocrits a little bit, but right. So what you want to do, you want to hydrate, and you want to have as like clear. So what that means is I'm trying to keep the videos to about 10 minutes or so a piece. Okay. Um, Formed elements. So formed elements, these are like the canonical red blood cells, right? That you see, the little donuts that you see. and little cell fragments, which we'll find out those are like platelets kind of later on. And of course, the white blood cells. I don't think yeah, the white blood cells are going to have to be yellow because white doesn't work on white. Right. And there are like a bunch of different kinds of those actually. And so we'll look at all of those different kinds and talk about those in just a few slides. Okay, but for now I want to end it here. And so we'll move on to part ART2 here in a bit.